On May 5th, 1904, the legend Cy Young pitches the very first modern perfect game. Why do we call it the perfect game? And why was it just the first modern one? We'll get into all of that today on Daily Sports History. Welcome to Daily Sports History. I'm Ethan Reese, your guide to a rapid deep dive into sports history every day. Now, if you don't know, in baseball, a perfect game is when a pitcher does not allow any hits, walks, hit batsmen, uncaught third strikes, catcher interference, fielder obstructions, or fielding errors. So even though we attribute a perfect game to a pitcher, it is really a team effort overall because a pitcher does not control errors. And you may have heard the term no-hitter, which if you throw a perfect game, you actually throw a no-hitter as well. A no-hitter is when no one gets a hit on you. So they may be walked, they may get hit by the batter, there may be errors. No-hitters are more common in baseball, but perfect games are very rare. And the chances of a pitcher throwing a perfect game is 0.000983%, a lot less than 1%. And it's only been done 20 times in the modern history of baseball. Now, the term perfect game actually didn't come from when Cy Young pitched his game. It came 4 years later when the Chicago Tribune wrote an article after Andy Jose pitched a perfect game for the White Sox, saying, and their quote was, an absolute perfect game without run, without hit, and without an opponent reaching first base by hook, crook, on hit, walk, or error in 9 innings. Luckily, they shortened that to a perfect game, and it was actually introduced into the Baseball Cyclopedia in 1922, giving it even more validity. And Major League Baseball didn't formally recognize the term perfect game until 1991 when they gave it the rules. Now, Cy Young had the very first modern perfect game, but there were 2 previous perfect games before this, both in 1880, with Lee Richmond pitching the first one for the Worcesters versus the Cleveland Blues. Then 5 days later, John Montgomery Ward of the Providence Grays pitched a perfect game versus the Buffalo Bisons. Now, the reason why these aren't considered modern is they didn't formalize the rules. There was no strike zone, the pitcher's mound was 10 feet closer, and you had 8 strikes to get an out. So very different kind of circumstances, whereas Cy Young, when he was pitching in 1904, had the more modern rules of 3 strikes and you're out, and there was a strike zone. Now, Cy Young deserves his own entire episode, and we're going to focus on mainly his perfect game today. But to give you a brief overview, Cy Young started his career with the Cleveland Spiders in 1990 and was with them for 8 years before making his way to the St. Louis Cardinals for 2 years in 1899, 1900. And then in 1901, the American League was upstarting, and they were signing all the national players they could. And they gave Cy Young one of the richest contracts for $35,000 a year, roughly $123,000 today. And by this point, he was one of the best pitchers in the world, not only having some speed, but really focusing on his control, which allowed him to pitch for many, many years. And back then, pitchers were more workhorses as they would pitch back-to-back games or go extended innings. And they didn't have as many relief pitchers back then as well. And they didn't have an intense training regimen, as he never warmed up very much before games, actually only using about 3 or 4 minutes to loosen up his arm before going to pitch an entire game. And by 1904, he was already 37 years old, which in today's baseball is very old for a pitcher or any player. What happened was, a few days earlier, on April 25th, they played the Athletics, and pitcher Rube Walden was able to beat the Boston Americans and had a one-hitter, meaning he only gave up 1 hit the entire game. And then he started to taunt Young, saying he couldn't best his performance. It was so good that no one could do better than that. So in the next game they had against the Athletics on May 5th, Cy Young took Waddell's trash talk to heart and went out and pitched arguably his best game of his career, retiring batter after batter, getting great help from his defense as well, as he was not striking out every single batter, as he only had 8 total strikeouts in the game. And for the 27 batters that he came up against, that means he had to really focus on getting the hitters to hit fieldable balls for his teammates. And by the 6th inning, his team had realized that he had not allowed any hits and that he was matching Waddell's challenge, and they didn't want to mess anything up. So nobody talked to him for the remainder of the game, which is now something that happens whenever a pitcher has a perfect game or a no-hitter. They will not talk to the pitcher for the rest of the game until it's either broken or the game is over. A tradition that still lives on to this day. And quite poetically, Cy Young had gotten 26 batters out in the entire game, and by the 9th inning, he was facing Rube Waddell for the final out of the game. So Waddell had the chance to break up the no-hitter and the perfect game, but Cy Young made sure that would not happen and struck him out with the final pitch of the perfect game. And after getting Waddell out, Young shouted at him, "How do you like that, you hayseed?" Which was a common put-down at the time, comparing someone to dirt or grass. And the game ended, lasting only 1 hour and 23 minutes. But this wasn't all that Cy Young was doing. See, this was the beginning of his 47 scoreless innings pitched, which is still a record that he holds to this day, well over 100 years later. And he also, during this time, he had the record of having 76 hitless batters, which wasn't broken till years later by Orel Hershiser in the 1970s. And the second perfect game didn't happen again till 4 years later, when we got the name for the perfect game by the Chicago White Sox, Andy Jose. And the very last perfect game ever pitched at the time of this podcast was in 2023 by Domingo Germain of the New York Yankees, who did so with only 99 pitches. Cy Young continued his great dominance in pitching. And in 1908, he would pitch another no-hitter and finish his career with an astonishing 511 wins, with a career 2.63 ERA and having 2,803 strikeouts. When he passed away is when they developed an award called the Cy Young Award for the best pitcher in the league. And it's hard to argue with another pitcher being as great, deserving that award. And this goes to show you that even though Cy Young was dominant, motivation could come from anywhere. And we always have to stay motivated if we want to achieve something. If Waddell had not challenged Cy Young, would he have ever pitched a perfect game? We may never know, but what we do know is that he was motivated to put that hayseed into his place and put his name in the record book. And for our record books, we would love to see you leave a rate and review wherever you are. It brightens my day every time I see someone that loves our show. Let us know. And come back tomorrow for more daily sports history.